Hey kids, do you know the rules in your house? I have rules in my house, and in our Bible story today, the king had rules in his house. And one of those rules was that you were not to interrupt him. The only way to see or talk with the king was if he invited you in. Now, if you did go to him without an invitation, there was one way that you knew you were going to be saved, and that's if the king held out his scepter towards you. If that happened, you would be able to visit with him. In our Bible story today, Esther goes and visits the king without an invitation. So let's go to our Gospel Project video to see how the king responded.
King Ahasuerus was the king of Persia. Many years earlier, when Cyrus was king, he sent some of God's people back to Judah to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. Some of God's people stayed in Persia. God's people were called Jews because they were from Judah. The king of Persia chose Esther to be his queen. Esther didn't tell the king that she was a Jew. One day, Mordecai heard that Haman, an important leader who worked for the king, was planning to kill all the Jews. Mordecai was upset. He was a Jew. He didn't want all the people he loved to be killed. Mordecai and all the Jews cried. Esther didn't know what was wrong. She sent a messenger to ask Mordecai why all the Jews were upset. Mordecai told Esther about Haman's evil plan. "You have to do something," Mordecai said. "Ask the king to stop Haman. Ask him to save the Jewish people." Esther sent a message back to Mordecai. "No one can approach the king unless the king calls for that person first," Esther said. "The punishment is death. Unless the king holds out his scepter, then you may live." "You're a Jew," Mordecai said. "If you don't stop Haman, he will kill you too. Maybe this is why you are the queen. Maybe God put Esther in the palace to save her people." Esther asked Mordecai and the Jews to fast for 3 days. Then Esther would go to the king, even if it meant she might die. On the 3rd day, Esther went to the king. He saw Esther and held out his golden scepter. "What is it, Queen Esther?" the king asked. "What do you want to ask me? I'll give you anything, up to half of my kingdom." Esther said, "Would you and Haman come to a feast today?" So Haman and the king went to Esther's feast. After eating, the king said, "What do you want, Queen Esther? I'll give you anything, up to half of my kingdom." "Come to my feast tomorrow," Esther said. The king agreed. The next day, Haman and the king went to Esther's feast. After eating, the king said, "What do you want, Queen Esther? I'll give you anything, up to half my kingdom." Esther spoke up. "There is a plan to kill me and my people." The king replied, "Who is responsible for this plan?" "This evil enemy, Haman," Esther said. The king was angry. He punished Haman and made a law to keep the Jewish people safe from their enemies. God was in control over Haman's evil plan to destroy the Jews. Like Haman, Satan wants to ruin God's plan and destroy believers. Satan thought he had won when Jesus died on the cross, but God raised Jesus from the dead and defeated Satan once and for all. All who believe in Jesus are rescued from sin and death.
Hey kids, so I'm going to try and balance this book on my head. Do you think I'm going to be able to do it while looking at the camera and talking? I don't know, we'll see. Okay, so that's actually pretty hard to try and stand still here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this for a long time. Well, that kind of reminds me of our story today about Esther. You see, Esther was a queen who was married to a king in Persia, and she had to keep her Jewish heritage secret for her safety. And if the king did not like her, he could just get rid of her like he did to the queen before Esther. But Esther had a decision to make. She had some things to balance. She had to balance her safety but also she wanted to be obedient to God. But the good thing is, Esther did not have to do all of this on her own. It was not all hers to balance or to shoulder by herself. See, God wanted Esther to be a king, so he made her a king to protect his people. Let's finish our time together in prayer. God, we are thankful for the story of Esther to remind us, God, that if it is your plan, that it will happen, God, that you in your time will make all things good, and God, that you keep your promises for your people. I pray these things in your name. Amen.